This was a rather strange week. I'm actually not sure what I did with all my extra time, because I could have sworn I watched more than I thought I did. But I guess I just started watching Pokemon Season 11, poking around at that. And I guess maybe we just didn't watch anime. That's right. Thursday I watched Memento with a friend, and Friday I watched IT Crowd Season 4 with a brother and his wife. And I probably started zombieing on Minecraft a whole lot all weekend. Maybe I watched something and I'm not remembering. But I guess I'll just have to go with what I know for certain, which is the fact that I did watch the first 4 discs of Pokemon Season 4. My goal, sorry, not Season 4, Season 11, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Battle Dimension, I believe. And, well, I don't know what to comment about it other than same old, same old. You know, I'm still feeling like Pokemon's like... Well, I'll probably not mention this, but at some point it definitely became something where it's always about the good characters giving positive reinforcement. This is probably a lot more of a stronger theme in the Diamond and Pearl series, simply because Paul, I think, was the rival's name in this one. I remember him more by name and context when characters refer to him. But yeah, he's the kind of person that like always talks down, puts other people down, etc., etc. And Ash and group are always about positive reinforcement, and I'm not saying that's actually a bad or a wrong message. It's just that sometimes it feels kind of blatantly forced in the case of our main characters. Maybe artificial when they decide Ash needs to revert to old Ash mode very briefly for whatever convenient excuse. I don't know. I've just been watching it. It's been pretty average for Pokemon. Something about the opening this time, while it's probably not close to any of my favorite openings, this one's actually kind of nice. Oh well, I will probably finish watching that just so I can be in between seasons, as opposed to in the middle of a season having to hunt down where I was in the middle of it. Oh well, let's see. There was a bunch of stuff that I rewatched before I can talk about the other new thing I know I watched. And first of all, I rewatched Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. That was because on the movie night we watched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And since I nominated Nausicaa for the next movie party, I felt the urge to watch it. And for the first time, I've actually watched it on the TV, watched something on the TV in my room while laying in my bed. My bed's not the twin size that I'm used to growing up on, so it being queen size and being able to actually lay in a more sideways fashion and having a dozen pillows to work with actually made it a very comfortable and enjoying experience. But as for the movie itself, it is still as awesome as I always remember it. It's definitely my favorite of Miyazaki's work. And then speaking of favorites of works, well, everything else I've watched and that I'm going to talk about is Makoto Shinkai's work. So in my anime update, you know, I imported some Blu-rays of his stuff that contained 5 centimeters per second voices of Distant Star, She and Her Cat, and his new movie, Children Who Hear Lost Voices from Deep Below. I think that's actually accurate now. I'm maybe getting close to remembering that name because I'm having trouble. But, you know, there's all of those. And then, of course, since The Place Promised in his early days is something The Place Promised in our early days, sorry. I've been meaning to rewatch that, and I wanted to watch all of these together to kind of come up with an understanding of why I might like Voices of a Distant Star the most out of all of them, and to also prepare myself to be able to talk about the new one and my feelings on the new one, especially with memories of all the others fresh in perspective. So, having done that, I actually think I have a pretty good idea of why I understand. So, I began with the place promised in our early days, and I remember a lot of it came back to me. I couldn't remember the exact details of everything that happened, but I remembered my problem with the place promised in our early days. The reason that I let Voices of a Distant Star higher on the list for that one is because it felt like it was trying to tell the same sort of story, the same concept. I think actually it's a very common thing he likes to tell. But the problem with Place Promised is it kind of felt like the message was more diluted or something along those lines. Where there was somewhat less focus on the message itself, I think. This is just for me. There's people who prefer different pacings of movies, for example, and some people who are probably used to slower paced stuff from olden days probably just can't fathom why people would enjoy some of the faster paced stuff presently, of newer stuff, modern stuff. There's kind of a taste in there, and Voices of a Distant Star and The Place Promised in our early days kind of exemplifies this idea where Voices is a lot more focused in what it's trying to do because it's shorter, one thing told by this one guy, etc., on a more limited budget, whereas The Place Promised in our early days is a lot more of exploring that atmosphere that was present in the first one. And for some people like me, I thought the atmosphere was a very good spice to add to it, but maybe in the case of The Place Promised in our early days, it was just a little bit too much spice. And this is actually closely related to the concept of 5 centimeters per second, which maybe felt kind of the same to me. Like, maybe I would have been more okay with 5 centimeters per second if it was just that first story, which I actually thought was a very interesting one, about two people who had separated and were going to work to come together, and this lingering question of all these hardships of them trying to get together would actually result in them finally being together. Kind of a one-sided, will somebody be there for me if I get there sort of concept. I'm maybe kind of being vague there, but that's something along the lines that I enjoyed about 5 centimeters per second. And as the stories went, I kind of just cared less and less. In fact, I can't even remember what the third one was about anymore. Oh well. And then, of course, I go back to Voices of a Distant Star after all of this, and once again, I still feel like it's my favorite. And I think part of that is it's watching it. It's definitely got a more concrete message, a more concrete feeling to it that is something I'm really looking for. And then something else I realized is Voices of a Distant Star is almost like listening to a soundtrack at the same time. I'm not saying the other ones didn't have nice music in them, but the music for Voices of a Distant Star is kind of going the whole time. It's kind of telling the story as well. This is almost like FLCL in a lot of ways, or in a completely different field from anime, but kind of still anime related. The Project Toho games, I've kind of realized every new game release is also kind of a new CD release from a favorite artist or something like that, where it's like, even if I don't play the games a whole lot, I really like listening to the music that he comes out with, and each one, comes with a full selection of songs that you would expect in a CD, an OST or a soundtrack release or whatever. I guess actually those are just soundtrack. Those are both the same words for soundtrack. But anyways, Voices of a Distant Star is almost more in that category than outside of it, and I think I'm just more heavily influenced by that way of projecting information. And on top of the fact that Voices of a Distant Star isn't as focused on the romance aspects as the other ones. And it's possible that the reason that this is maybe a slightly less common preference and it explains why a lot of people tend. Well, I'm guessing a lot of people tend to vote 5 centimeters per second as more enjoyed because that's what they're looking for. And Voices of a Distant Star could be a mix of different things that just catch my attention more and allowing me to focus more on the romance going on in the background, I guess. Well, not in the background, but at the same time. And I don't know if I have anything particularly noteworthy to say about She and Her Cat, but I guess that was actually kind of worthwhile to watch. So, I watched all of that in preparation for children who hear voices from children who hear lost voices from deep below. That's a long one. So, that one was very different from all of his other works. It's interesting because that one seems to be more here to tell a story, almost. And actually, that's simultaneously the good and kind of the weak thing about it, I thought. Where I probably enjoyed that a whole lot more than a lot of his other works, except for Voice of a Distant Star, but a lot of his works have focused on this relationship between people sort of aspect, and this one, that's an important concept, but I'm not sure if it focuses on it as much. You can almost argue that The Place Promised in our early days didn't focus on it as much, but that was still kind of the overall purpose, whereas this one, maybe not. It's almost like Spirited Away in a lot of ways, where there were kind of two focuses to Spirited Away, where there was the story focus and then there was the characters encountering things aspect. And in this case, it's more like there's the adventure aspect and the relationship aspect, which is kind of vaguely on the horizon through the entire movie. Which I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but I kind of felt at the end that I wasn't quite sure what they were trying to do at the end exactly. If there was necessarily a fulfilling reason for it, but overall, it didn't really matter. It means that it didn't impact me in any way that left me thinking this is definitely going on my list of favorites. But it left me pleased with what I had watched, I guess. Like these people had gone on an adventure. Some questions I felt I didn't. It felt like there were some unanswered questions, and normally that's not a problem. The real issue is that, I guess, if unanswered questions would have been a good purpose, there would probably be less things said and done very explicitly near the end. A little too much explaining of some concepts, I guess. Painting a partial picture that suggests that maybe all the information was given to you, when maybe that wasn't actually the case, and there's some of these blinks are very intended for us to fill in. I'm not sure. I don't pretend to be very good at these things. All I know is I watched it, I enjoyed it. It's my second favorite of his works, but my favorite is Voices of a Distant Star, and most people might not like that one as much. So take that what you will. That's what I've watched thus far. And since I've been thinking about these, I haven't thought about anything else I might have forgotten I've watched, so I guess I'll just have to end it there and say